Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Ross Nation. Good evening and welcome along to the Flagship Show. Week 4 is done and in the books. And it's about that time now where if you drafted a fantasy player, they are now on IR. And I think that goes for every fantasy player that ever existed. And we're all starting Geno Smith and Cooper Rush and Mike Boone this week now. So, Murf, I hope you've dug deep into your players this week because there's some research and analysis needed here. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm good, yeah. There just seems to be every minute there just seems to be someone else goes down. I feel like Thanos is playing fantasy football and he's just done that and half the players are gone.
There is a proverbial plethora of players.
It feels like week 14, not week 4. Like in the terms of I had fantasy teams this week where I was starting I had a league where I had to start Rashad White. As a running back, I had a league where I had to start Cole Beasley because there's no one else. I just had leagues where I just got absolute I won league. I had 8 wide receivers out. I had eight wide receivers weren't able to play. I'm
still on Noah Brown. I did well enough to pick Noah Brown up after a couple of weeks, so he's still filling in my flex spots at the minute and doing okay with it as well. So. Yeah,
I mean, there's some areas of him, but he's got so. Evening, Jack. Nice to see you.
What?
Yeah. It's nuts at the moment. It's hard to think of a starter, and we've had so many more just even in the last hour of players going to IR, and I think it's an interesting one. And this is why I like leagues where there's significant flex spots, because this is where, as a fantasy player, if you're listening to this kind of show, if you're doing this kind of research, yes, you are having to start the Noah Browns of this world and players that are really, really obscure. But because you're doing the knowledge and you're listening and you're observing and you're active, this is where, if you're playing in those leagues that are much, much deeper, either they have more flex starts or smaller benches or something along those lines, they just make it a little bit more difficult, especially 12-team leagues, 14-team leagues, for example. The cream rises to the top in these scenarios. Whereas unless you've just been absolutely destitute and you've got everyone that's injured, then of course that isn't going to happen, and that's just rubbish. I've got teams that are 0-4 where literally I've lost Jacoby Myers and I've lost Keenan Allen and I lost Alvin Kamara and now CPAT. I'm down to the point in that particular league where it's not going to happen this year. That's fine. It's painful, but that is what it is. But in other leagues where if you've just been really clever and you've just been following usage trends and you've just picked up the Noah Browns, you picked up, necessary Khalil Herberts, but even players like Josh Palmer, these sorts of players that are coming through and players that you could have continually picked up off waiver wire and recycled and refreshed players. You're going to do so much better because you might suffer 1 or 2 injuries, but you're going to exploit those injuries as well. We've been talking in the show for months about Melvin Gordon. Now Melvin Gordon all of a sudden becomes a premium asset. And if you've been listening to us, well, he will. Every player fumbles the ball. I mean, every player fumbles the ball at some point.
He's got the gyps, man. He's got the gyps.
All right. Look, it's going to be a few. I think there's going to be a few instances where we're going to have, this is going to be a really interesting show now because we're going to dive into some things we learned. We're going to learn and we're going to dive into some usage trends and even some of the stuff we talked about last week. Some of it's validated, some of it's completely flipped, and that's why we do this. It's because we're trying to stay ahead of the game, but we will do. But yeah, I mean, it was a brutal week for for a lot of teams last week. I mean, neither of us were there for the Saints B team performance. Just to be fair, I think Andy Dalton did well. I think he had a decent game considering that he had.
I didn't see a lot of it. I was out, so
Chris Olave and a few people have chucked it. He didn't have a lot there. So yeah, I think it was. it's definitely a good way. It's starting to see these offenses power through now, so we're starting to see more points creep through. Unless you're a Chicago Bears fan, and that obviously is not the case. Just a little point that Stephon Diggs has scored more fantasy points than the entire Bears receiving core this season.
I think I've scored more fantasy points than the entire Bears receiving core, and I'm sat on my backside on the sofa right now. So,
yeah, it's
mind you, we saw a week with Leonard Fournette, right? Come up as an RB1 with -3 rush yards.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the year of the weird.
It is a very weird year. Yeah, Jack.
The Giants haven't got a QB yet.
Davis Webb in London next week. Can't wait for that. You know,
well, they don't have a fit QB, but he was fit enough to block as a wide receiver.
Well, so people were confused about this, right? It made some sense to me in the sense of you've got to give some form of essence. At the end of the day, he was on there as bad as he was because they didn't have another QB listed. They had nothing else they could do. It was to protect Saquon. Because if you don't have Daniel Jones out there, everyone rushes Saquon. Now, if you lose Saquon,
the safety standing 6 yards off the line, right?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, and Jack will probably agree with me here, Daniel Jones is replaceable. Saquon is not.
Oh,
so
the year he's having.
This is what I mean. So, like, at the end of the day, if you didn't have Daniel Jones out there as some form of decoy, and they thought, oh, okay, so we're just going to line Saquon up, and they're winning the game. Don't forget this. If they're down 40-0, this isn't happening. You're not having Saquon. They would have pulled Saquon, and they would have put Matt Breida in the Wildcat and just said, Breida, go nuts. But they're winning the game, and it's a close game. So they have to try and maintain the ball. So that's why he's out there. That doesn't necessarily mean he's fit. We saw this in a playoff game. I'm pretty sure we saw. Was it AJ? It wasn't AJ McCarron. Who was the? I'm trying to think of the backup Philly QB was.
Nick Foles.
Wasn't Nick Foles? It wasn't AJ McCarron. It was someone like AJ McCarron, basically, who was the backup in Philly a couple of years ago, and he got injured, and then he came back and he ran some wide receiver routes as decoy because they literally had no one else at wide receiver to play. But I think it's just one of those things. But that's why I think Dan Jones is out. But I don't think you'll see him on Sunday. I'd be surprised. I mean, we haven't had anything today, which is, I suppose, a good sign if you are a Daniel Jones truther. But yeah, I think. Week 4, and it's only going to get worse. Every week we're going to be talking about the amount of players go down.
Well, we're here now. Davis Webb, Geno Smith, Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
Like the pinnacle of QB players back.
Justin Fields. Oh, wait, no, he starts every week. Oh, my bad.
Eli Manning sat on that sofa on a Monday Night Football going, yeah, it might be a job for me going somewhere soon enough.
So I was doing some homework actually earlier, seeing which QBs were out there.
Cam Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton's out there.
Yeah.
He was the big one out there. But there are a few sort of capable...
I think Josh Rosen hasn't had a club for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think you could sign... like, I looked at a few, because don't forget, New England might be without
Ryan Fitzpatrick can come back out of retirement.
Yeah, I think Garrett Gilbert, is out there. Josh McCown was who I was thinking of. McCown is who I was thinking of when I came to... wide receiver QBs at Philadelphia. But anyway, yes, even Ben Roethlisberger, he's out there. The bottom line is there's a few options out there that you could bring into.
I think I'd take every name we mentioned ahead of Ben. Like someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's only out of retirement. If he would come back, if you could pay him on a short-term deal, he could step in and do a sufficient enough job.
Yeah, and so here's the list of players: Josh Johnson, Cam Newton, Blake Bortles, Mike Glennon.
Mike Glennon's always been a steady hand as a.
I think Nathan Peterman is still out there somewhere. I think AJ McCarron is still in the league somewhere.
No.
Tim Boyle.
No.
There's a few. Anyway, look, it's fine. The bottom line is there's still QBs there that can come in, but we'll see what happens coming.
AJ McCarron is on the Falcons practice squad.
Well, there you go. So anyone can sign him. There you go. AJ McCarron season. Let's bring it.
2 months
I'm
ago,
here for
according
it.
to the news. Yep.
I'm here for it. I am here for it. One of the things that surprised me this week, we'll get into this section, is that Kenny Pickett turned up.
Well, Mitch Trubisky might be on the open market if somebody needs a QB now.
No. No. Listen, I think it's extraordinary. And like you've just mugged off Big Ben there. But Big Ben took this team to the playoffs last season.
He did, yeah.
And Mitch Trubisky's come in, who is significantly younger, supposedly healthier, and all this. He's been awful.
Yes.
Like, not as bad as Justin Fields, but he's been awful. Like, he has been
substandard.
Like, I didn't think we were going to see Kenny Pickett unless this team lost 9-10 games.
Yeah, I thought we'd get
I thought towards the end
into the buyers, yeah.
No, I didn't think then. I thought they would roll Trubisky out until they were out. Stacey saying,
sorry, Stacey.
Well, no. But I genuinely thought this was a learning year for Pickett. And I think that was the plan. I think the idea was because that squad with that D, with that, they've got enough offensive weapons. That's a playoff team.
I guess now, though, the way they were trending isn't the playoffs. And if they carry on, they won't make it. So why not do it now and just see if we can shake this up a little bit?
True. And that is probably what their thinking is. Because if they lose
to sit at half time in a game rather than give him for a week and run into a game. But actually, sometimes the best way to learn to do something is to jump on a horse and see how it goes, right? So you don't have time to think. You don't have time to panic or whatever. You're in the game, son. Get your finger and go and work on instinct and trust your feel.
No, and sometimes I think these quarterbacks are held out a little bit too long, and actually that's at their detriment. But I don't think the plan was to have Kenny Pickett there at any point, at least for the next few weeks. And so for him to be in the game was a huge surprise for me. And I thought he did reasonably well. I don't think he was, I wouldn't say he was as good as I thought he could be. I'm saying he was as bad as I expected. You know, he got a couple of rushing touchdowns. He sort of kept the ball moving. He got them into the game.
His stat line doesn't read well because of the interceptions. But having seen what and when and how they happened, I wasn't too fussed about him.
No.
One was his first throw, and okay, you get that out of your system, you move on. One was a Hail Mary at the end. That can happen to anybody.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I don't count those.
No, me neither. So
what did concern me
is the 2 rushing touchdowns. If you're an owner of Najee Harris sat here now, or even one of the receivers, is that going to be a continual thing? Yeah, 6 rushes, 15 yards, but 2 scores in that. If you're sitting here on Najee Harris now, does that concern you?
There's something with Najee Harris, right? So there is something, the way that he's being used. You know, we're used to Najee Harris having a pretty much 100% role. I talked about this a little bit last week, that Jaylen Warren got a little bit of usage. He's getting little bits of usage here and there, Jaylen Warren. Like, he is getting some carries. There's definitely not all is right with Najee Harris. I think if we get to the point where they are out of contention, I think you'll see Najee Harris. If I'm an owner of Najee Harris right now, I'm trading him in redraft, because I can see a scenario now where if they don't make the playoffs or they're not in playoff contention, they're going to shut him down, or they're going to just really significantly cut back his role.
I will say his returns aren't what they were last year. He's not that down on attempts, but his yardage is way down now. So he isn't delivering when he has the opportunity.
Well, that's because he's got a Liz Frank injury. So it's an ongoing injury, right? He's playing hurt. And that's what I mean, in the sense of it's either going to go really catastrophically wrong, or he's going to play at this sort of 70-75% production because he's not 100% fit. And that's an issue, because he's not going to deliver these big numbers that fantasy owners are used to having. But he's going to deliver. He should deliver enough numbers to warrant starting, considering what we're seeing at the position anyway. It's just an interesting... If you took Najee Harris with a very early pick in redraft, you're probably not going to see a return on that. But what you are hoping is that he can stay healthy long enough to at least give you something. Or if you can trade him, the problem is, if you're going to trade him, you've got to trade him to someone who doesn't know what's going on.
But this is the other thing. I want to just look into Harris because it struck me a little bit. So this week he had his most rushing attempts and he had his most yardage on the season so far.
Yeah,
he had his lowest fantasy score. He's only got 1 touchdown, so it's not because of that. What does strike me is he didn't have 1 target in the air game.
No.
And I don't know. Obviously, Pickett came in at half time. If that's going to be a continuing trend, that would really concern me right now. Because, okay, when he's having 15 attempts for 56 yards like he did in week 3, he still put up 15 points. He got a score. He put up 16 the week before without a score because he had 6 targets, 5 receptions for 40 yards. But without the targets, at the minute, his running game isn't enough to sustain him holding an RB spot down.
No, but I think that's more down to how bad the Steelers offense has been. And I think that's the other side of this coin is the Steelers have put up 23, including overtime. So it was 20 points in a regular game. And by the way, the D scored 7 of those. So they scored really 13 offensive points, 14 offensive points, 17 offensive points, and then 20 offensive points. And I think actually in that, no, there wasn't a defensive score in there. But that's what I mean. They're struggling to put up points right now. And then you've got this change at QB. Basically, it's just not working. Mm-hmm. And I would say, look, you're right about the targets. It's not good. There isn't targets. But the bottom line is his yards per reception have been extremely poor all season. 1.5 yards per reception in week 1, 1.67 in week 3. They're not going to get anything done. Yeah, you get the token reception points, but they're not going to do anything. The things that are interesting me is more the snap counts. 71% in week 2, 80% in week 3, 75% in week 4. He played less in week 1 because he came into the game hurt.
Yeah.
We're used to Najee Harris having 90%, 85%. Even at 75%, that's still not the volume that you need. The one thing that I would say going behind the box score is
3 games under 75% last year.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is we're not used to this. But the one thing I would say is he's still getting close to 20 touches a game. Mm-hmm. And that is still going to be enough to sustain him at a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 level. And that's my point is he's still going to put up the numbers regardless because of the volume. The volume's going to be there. It's just not enough, especially as what you're saying in the passing game, to elevate him into the upper echelon. He's not going to be in those top 5, top 6 backs. And that's where you drafted him. What you don't want now as a Najee Harris owner, and this is where I would try and move him on if I could, is what you don't want is him to be shut down or taken out through injury.
Yeah.
Because both of those things can easily happen. This Steelers team now is 1-3. They've lost to the Jets. They won a game on opening day that they shouldn't have won. That's just the fact of the matter. And then you look at their next couple of games, they lost to New England, who don't look great. They lost to the Browns, who look all right, but they don't look great. And then they they got beaten, like hammered by the Browns. And then they lost to the Jets. I mean, it's not good. They've still got to play Baltimore twice. They've still got to play the Bengals again. They've still got to play the Browns again. Like, it's not looking great for the Steelers, and they've got a difficult schedule as it is.
They've got Tampa Bay in there. They've got the Eagles in there. They've got the Colts in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough schedule. And
Buffalo next week.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I would need now as a Najee Harris owner, I need clarity at the quarterback position, because the worst thing you could see now is Mitch Trubisky come back. I think if you've moved to Pickett,
they can't bring him back now, surely.
You say that. We've seen this time and time again where they play a rookie and then they go back to the veteran and then they just flip-flop. We saw it in Miami a couple of years ago. We've seen it time and time again. It does happen. It is just that case of if they do think that they can win better with Trubisky, then it is a significant problem for Najee. Well, I don't think it's a significant problem for Harris. I think it's a significant problem for the offense, because we've seen now through 3.5 games what this offense is under Trubisky, which is it's not good. Whereas at least with Pickett, for me, it can't get a lot worse. So it can only get better. And that's where I think actually if it went to Pickett, I think you'll see Deontay Johnson come into the game more. I think you'll see more. I think you will see more from Najee Harris, because I think you'll see opportunities there.
Stacey, our Steelers fan, reckons they'll go back and give Mitch one last chance.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't. And here's the thing, right? This contract that they signed him to, it wasn't like they were betting the franchise. That's why they drafted Kenny Pickett. In the first round, it's not a monetary thing that they're playing Mitch Trubisky. They're playing him because they severely believe that he is the best person for them. I don't know if I agree, but at the same point, I can see Stacey's point because I'm thinking, well, you've built the offense around him effectively this season because that's why you brought him in. You've brought Pickett in for next year. I can see a scenario, but I also think, well, you've benched him. You've made that decision to bench him. It's 3.5 games.
Yeah.
And you've made that decision now that your offense is not working. So we're going to try something different. And I think you
see how that goes.
You need to see how that goes because I think it's detrimental to keep flip-flopping. And we talked about this in last week's show where we talked about an offense that was we talked about it with Denver, where they were continually trying different things, different personnel groupings, different scenarios to just try and get something going on offense. And it wasn't working. And you know what? It's still not working. Why? Because they still continue to do things that are completely different. At the end of the day, you make a course correction, you see how that goes, and then you adjust.
Yeah.
You can't just keep chopping and changing. But we'll see what happens. But I think the bottom line is I would be slightly concerned. I think if I could get out of Najee Harris right now and I could get something close to his value, I'm probably taking it because I do think this Liz Frank injury, as you say, it is causing some production deficiency from what we would expect. And that is because he is hurt. But he's not hurt enough to miss time.
Yeah. It's also the uncertainty surrounding it. So we're surprised to see Pickett. We're surprised to see him do fairly well, I think. There's 2 other backup QBs or 1 backup QB that's doing really well right now in Cooper Rush in Dallas.
Cooper Rush has been incredible, right? So he is, I think he's 4-0 now as an NFL starter.
4-0, yes. Yeah,
4-0 as an NFL starter. They've won their last 3 games off the back of Cooper Rush. I mean, you're talking about rolling the dice here. And you're thinking if you're Dallas, you lose Dak Prescott for 3 to 4 weeks, you're thinking, do you know what? If we can go 500 over this stretch,
hang on in there. Yeah.
That's a win. Yeah. This is bonus ball now from Cooper Rush. And he's played well. Like, I'm not sitting here saying he's QB of the year and he should be going to the Pro Bowl or whatever they're going to call it now. But, he went 15 to 27 for 223 and 2 TDs and didn't turn over the ball. He averaged 8.5 yards per attempt. He had 11 yards depth of target. I mean, like, at the end of the day, Cooper Rush is playing solid football. And as a QB, as a backup QB, he's doing better than a significant number of starting QBs right now because he's just playing. He's playing to his strengths. It's just a case of, and look, it helps that he has
one. He hasn't had Gallup, and they've still lost Amari Cooper, and Schultz has banged up one of them games, and but he still has CD Lamb, he still has Zeke Elliott, still has Tony Pollard. He still has players, Noah Brown. He still has players that he can throw the ball to. What he also has is a competent offensive line, and that does help, and a good D. So the D is making stops. He's getting time to play. They're making the most of it. Decent field position. Yeah.
But this is the difference between, and I'm not going to try and give Mick McCarthy too much credit here, but this is about making adjustments to, in order to try and win football games, the first thing you got to do is have the football. You've got to make adjustments to keep the football as long as possible.
I think them bringing in Dan Campbell was a master stroke there on that defense.
Not Dan Campbell.
Not Dan Campbell. Who do I mean then?
You do mean Dan. Oh, his last name's completely escaped me.
I'm on it.
Oh, God. Former coach of the Vikings. No, the Falcons. Oh. His name is completely...
Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. No, that has massively helped him. But it's not just that. I mean, good, because you got a team that can stop the ball. They can stop drives. We've seen this consistently last season. We've seen it consistently this season. But what they have done is they're scheming Cooper Kupp to say, look, we don't want you to do things that you can't do. We're not going to ask you to get outside the pocket too much. We're not going to ask you to do loads of things with your legs like Dak does. We're not going to ask you to throw loads of deep balls. What we're going to do is we're just going to ask you to just play safety ball, play between the numbers, just get those plays, 5-yard, 10-yard plays. Just keep getting chunk plays and just keep taking the ball downfield. But more importantly, hold on to the football. Just don't turn the ball over. and we're going to be
and
fine.
we'll be in every game. Yeah.
And that is half the battle in this. But the other half is just making sure that you go on drives that take up clock. Because whilst you've got the ball, your defense can rest, then they get better. And that's ultimately where good coaching has come in. And that's not what we're seeing from other teams. Tampa's a great example of deficient coaching so far this season. Because you've got a team like they had the ball for less than 22 minutes last night. You're not going to win football games that often with the ball with less than 22 minutes. You have to make sure that you can balance an attack. That the Buccaneers have not managed. I can't recall, or they must have done, but I can't recall many, if any, plays where they've used play action. So they're not selling the run or the pass. It's one or the other. It's very telegraphed, and they're relying on skill to beat players. That works to a degree, but it doesn't work week in, week out. We see it with the Bears. People sit there and they blame the Bears O-line for this start. It's not. It's a combination of scheme, talent. Yes, the offensive line is a big part of that, but it's on the quarterback. He's got to make plays. He has plenty of times he's got the ball in his hand and he doesn't make the throw. There is a point where everything comes into play here. But it's coaching. Coaching is the fundamental line of all of that, because if you were looking at Justin Fields and you think, right, he's really struggling right now, what we need to do is give him throws that he can make.
Yeah.
We don't try and get him to do things he can't do. We'll try and get him things he can do. And do you know what that means?
Build that confidence.
You build the confidence. You give him some simple screens. You give him some flats. Yeah. You give him some, you scheme over receiver. Exactly that. Just a few short curl routes from receivers. Yeah. Whatever needs to be done so that Justin Fields can just start getting completions. He's completing 50.7% of his passes. So give him higher percentage plays. Give him plays that he's going to make.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start breeding a bit of confidence, and then he can start pinging some deep balls rather than sitting there and asking him to try and just do something every single play.
The Hollywood pass every time. Yeah.
And that's what kills me, is you just sit there and you see this across the league. There's certain teams that are very good at just making sure that their quarterback can make plays, and there's certain teams that just can't do it.
The Niners have done it for the last 2 years with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, exactly that. You play to the strengths of the quarterback. That's the most important position. And that's what the Steelers need to do now, and they need to do that under Kenny Pickett. But there's other teams that need to do that as well.
Cool.
But so that's why Cooper Rush has been good, because it's good coaching, good scheme. But don't take anything away from Cooper Rush. He still had to deliver.
Yeah, of course he has. And another QB that delivered this week is Geno Smith up in Seattle. More throwing attempts, more throwing touchdowns than Russ ever had while he was there at the minute.
QB7 on the week. He is top 7 in passer rating this season. Yeah. He's had a phenomenal season. Like, at the end of the day, if you are the Seahawks front office right now, you must be laughing, because his production levels are about on par with what Russell Wilson was doing in his last couple of years. Only you've got all the assets that you've got with him.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the players you've got probably aren't doing load. Like Drew Lock is now an afterthought. His NFL career is pretty much hanging in tatters. Noah Fant isn't really. I mean, I know he scored at the weekend, but let's be honest, he's not really panned out the way that we kind of hoped he would in the NFL. At least I hope. But you got Shelby Harris. He's done some good things on that D. When fit, although he's not always been fit. But you've got the picks, and you don't have, and the thing is, you got the money as well. I think it's an interesting the thing that they're going to have now.
Do you think they can keep Geno going forward in years and build around him now? With
that's now.
At the time of the trade, it seemed like a make weight. Get through the year, pick up a QB next year, and move. But he's delivering right now.
Well, we thought that Seattle would be a bottom 5 team, right? Yep. We thought that with everything that they've got rid of, we thought they're a bottom 5 team. They'll get a QB next year. And that could still happen. But I think what happens is if Geno keeps, that division, with the exception of the Rams, you look at the teams in there and you think, wow, this is going to be a really tough division for them to perform in. Arizona don't look good right now. They really, really don't look good. And then you've got San Francisco on their backup QB. If I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the rest of the NFC right now, let's look at who you would say are the potential studs of the NFC. The Rams is the Super Bowl champions. The Packers, because they're the Packers and they play in the easiest division.
Tampa on their day can
Tampa, but they're 2-2
in the league. Yeah,
granted,
the Eagles.
But now you got the
with
Eagles.
their schedule, though, they've got to wait and see how they pan out.
Yeah, but all right, but they're up there.
They still only beat what's in front of them, and they're beating them.
But the Eagles, the Cowboys. So you say right now, Packers, maybe the Vikings, Cowboys, Eagles, Bucks, Rams. So you have a 7th spot, effectively, that is wide open.
Yep.
I would say it's wide open. 6 and 7, but I think especially the 7th spot, you're looking at what? You're looking at the Falcons, the 49ers, the Cardinals. You're looking for second place in that division, probably gets the 7th seed.
Yeah.
The Seahawks are in the mix. If Geno keeps playing the way he's playing, they're in the mix. I'm not going to say they're going to get there, but they're in the mix. And that's not something that anyone would have predicted. Do I think they get there? Probably not. But I think what they're going to do is they end up going to win enough games to where they're not going to get the QB that they want. So then that does put them, for Geno Smith, this is a great opportunity because if Geno Smith wins enough games, every game that he wins takes them further away from the opportunity to draft his replacement.
He's not only playing for another shot, he's playing for
his career in the league.
Pick.
Yeah, because and the further he pushes that pick back,
the more chance he's got.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they have Denver's first, and that looks like that could be pretty high right now. So maybe that's not quite.
I think
entirely
if he continues
true.
As he is, they'll use the earlier picks to strengthen elsewhere in the roster, and then they won't pick up a premium QB that this clamour's going to be for. They'll pick up an Anthony Richardson type person somewhere down the line and take a gamble on it. And if they sit him like Pickett has or something like that, then so be it next year. And I think they'll pick up a future prospect as opposed to someone looking to come in and be an immediate starter.
That could happen, but I think right now you're looking at it, and I'd say the 2 QBs I'd be dabbing off the waiver wire would be, Jared Goff and Geno Smith. And I think if you'd said that to anybody in early September, I think most people would have laughed at you. But Geno Smith has put up some really, really good numbers. Last week, 320 passing yards, 2 TDs. He's putting up some really, really big numbers, but he also added 49 yards rushing, which is not what anyone expected from Geno Smith. I think you're looking at Geno Smith now as someone who's just capable. He's almost like Cooper Rush in that way. He's capable. He's not going to sit there and shoot the lights out, although he has been. I will expect some form of regression. But again, what both those QBs have done, and again, this goes back to coaching, they're not turning the football over. They're not making those key crucial mistakes that puts their jobs at risk.
Yeah.
And I think if Geno Smith, as long as he doesn't turn over the football at a regular pace, he's going to have a great job of a great chance of hanging on. Drew Lock, I think, is borderline finished. I don't think he gets another job. I mean, like
the Giants need somebody. Can have a 2-week loan or 3-week loan.
Well, yeah, I don't know what the Giants do. Well, there's a few teams.
Because at the minute they're 3-1. They're competing. They're probably not going to want to throw this away and not have a standard average quarterback.
No.
What it costs them to go and get one, is that worth it? I don't know.
But who do you get now? Like if I'm sitting there and I'm looking if I'm the Giants, right, GM, and I'm sitting there thinking like what it's going to cost to get a QB right now versus, and as well, getting one ready for Sunday. Because don't forget, you've got to bring one in, then you've got to fly him to London, and then he's going to have one trade. Like the bottom line is that's not going to happen. Realistically, they're not going to bring anyone in. It's just not. You're going to have to roll with Davis Webb because Davis Webb knows the playbook. He's been there for a couple of years. He knows he's practiced the plays. He's on the the squad that plays the first team every week. So the bottom line, it's scout team. That's the word I was looking for. They've got all. He's going to be there. He's going to start. If Daniel Jones can't go, Tyrod's not going to go because there's no way they're going to let him on the plane with a concussion. It's not going to happen.
Tua flew home with a concussion, but yeah.
What's that?
Tua flew home from Cincinnati with a concussion.
Well, yeah. And we all know how that turned out. So, but you're not going to try a transatlantic flight, and that's I just can't see a scenario where Tyrod travels to London and plays. So it's going to be Davis Webb on the plane, regardless. So then you're looking at that, and you're looking at him versus Jones. Yeah, I mean, it's how good is Jones' his ankle, and is he going to be able to go? But I don't think you're going to see much in terms of. I don't think you're going to see an opportunity for them to trade this week. I don't think Daniel Jones' injury is going to be bad enough for him to miss multiple weeks.
Fair. So, statistical trends we like to touch on each week. We talk about things to monitor and look forward to and what's changing and how people are performing.
Just before we get into that, it's just a point it was a point I wanted to make, right? And it's something that it gets said a lot, and it's something that good fantasy players will follow. But I want to pass on this advice because I think it's really crucial for people who are trying to pick up not just waiver wire pickups, but start sit decisions. And I want to kind of lift the curtain a little bit because this weekend, more than any other, this is so true. When we're struggling to pick players who are going to either break out or we're starting with start sit decisions, one of the criteria I use is NFL betting lines, right? And the reason I look more specifically at the over and under. I want to know the total points in the game because I want to make sure I've got as many players started in the games that are supposed to be most high scoring. Why? More opportunities equals more points, etc. Right? It seems quite obvious, but people will tend to lean towards talent or game situation without necessarily accruing that in. The reason why it's so important is that, believe it or not, more often than not, and especially this week, they're not often wrong. And the players that appear in the games with the quote unquote bookies' highest scoring games tend to be at the top of fantasy football charts. So, for example, this week,
that makes sense, right? Higher score, more touchdowns, more opportunities to score.
And the quickest and easiest way to find that information is look and Google NFL betting lines over and under. Right, and then it will pull it up. So I've got last week's betting lines. Just waiting for it to reload here. And the betting lines for last week, the biggest game on the schedule was Bills at Ravens, which was 51, which, didn't quite live up to that torrential. But the weather kind of killed that, right? The second highest scoring game on the slate was Seahawks at Lions, 48 points, right? Who was number one in fantasy football so far this week? TJ Hawkinson of the Lions. Right? Who's number 4? Jared Goff of the Lions. Who's number 5? Geno Smith of Seattle. Right? Number 9, Rashard Penny. So 4 players in the top 10 have come from that game. In PPR scoring.
And we haven't got to Jamal Williams. He can't be a million miles off that top 10 either at the minute.
No, exactly. So Jamal Williams was 20th.
Yeah, so that's a quarter. 5 in 20 is a quarter of the players in the top 20 production this week came from that one game.
Yeah, in that one game. And 32 teams and 2 of them contribute to 20%. The next game in the slate, by the way, so we're talking about that... Buffalo, Josh Allen was in the top 20, by the way. So, but yeah, the rain kind of ruined that, and you would have to have adapted accordingly, right? Next highest game on the slate. So we had Seahawks Lions at 48. The next highest game on the slate.
Tampa, Kansas?
No. It was Browns at Falcons, 47 and a Browns at
Falcons. They both scored over 26, haven't they, for games so far?
Yeah, so you had the Browns at Falcons. You had a lot of players that started to appear, not quite necessarily in the top 20, but you had a lot of players sort of touching the fringes there, especially in the ground game. Nick Chubb, for particular, was in there. They've made reasonable finishes. But ultimately, that game did produce some performances, but maybe not quite as well. It was also hampered by the weather. Next game on the slate, though, was Jacksonville and the Eagles, which, again, features heavily here. So... you had, for example, Miles Sanders, 8th on the week. Where else?
Trevor Lawrence won't be very high.
No. Trevor Lawrence didn't have a good game. There's a few. Sorry, I've just seemed to have missed. By the way, I missed Josh Reynolds. He was inside the top 30 this week.
Okay.
But yeah, I just lost my screen. But, Jalen Hurts would have been inside the top 50 this week. There's a lot of players, and it's easy to say, Jalen Hurts, etc.
Just out of curiosity, if you got the betting lines there, what was the bottom? Are we going with the Bears?
The bottom game, I think, was no. Bottom. Oh, it was. Sorry, the Bears and the Giants, 39.5%.
I'm going to say one. I bet there isn't many inside the top 70 or 80 players.
Yeah. So I tell you now. In the top 100 players, right? So I'm just going to do New York Giants. Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones was the highest scoring. He was the high. Yeah. Daniel Jones was the highest scoring Giant. So he was 27th. Saquon was 41st. The Giants DST was 53.
Okay. I didn't give up many
53rd
points. Yeah.
53rd on the week, and that's it for the Giants. The
top
Chicago
100.
Bears in the top 100. The Chicago Bears inside the top 100.
So they had less in the top 100, including their defense, than Detroit had in the top 20.
Right. How many Chicago players made it in the top 100?
Zip.
2. 2 made
Herbert,
it.
Maybe.
Highest player
Khalil
was
Herbert.
Darnell. No, highest player was Darnell Mooney, 77th.
Oof.
And then in 80th was Michael Badgley, the kicker, who they just signed 24 hours before the game. So you had 3 players. So you have 5 players in total in the top 100. One was a DST,
kicker.
one was a TST, one was a kicker, and only Daniel Jones made the top 50. And that's why the betting lines matter. Is, all those players, you could assign. And I talked about Richie Grant, someone's got to catch the ball, etc. But ultimately, you've got to look at these matchups and think, well, if they're not high-scoring games, they're games that you shouldn't be signing or you should be making start-sit decisions on. You need to make sure. Same with Commanders and Cowboys. Not that many high-scoring players would have featured that week. Patriots versus Packers was the second. Now, Patriots-Packers, second lowest scoring game on the slate. DB had Romeo Doubs 74th, Aaron Jones 67th, and they had Rodgers and Lazard in the top 50.
Okay.
And I don't think New England would have had anyone in the top 50. Maybe, let's see.
Bailey Zappi.
So Damien Harris was 59th. Damien Harris was the highest scoring. He was and Stevenson. So the 2 running backs were inside the top 100. That was it.
Wow. There is what I will say is the betting lines are conducted and created by a lot of people with a lot of information and a lot at stake. That's why they do not get it wrong often.
Right. And I think, and by the way, so people don't perhaps know what is a good number, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would say anything sub 43 on the betting line.
45 is my benchmark I work to.
Yeah, but I think in fantasy football, it depends on the size of your league, right? But I'm thinking 12 teams with a couple of flex spots, you're starting 8 to 10 players.
Yeah.
I think you've got to lower that threshold slightly. Just to look at, it depends on the value of the teams and the players you've got. Because on your 45, for example, you would have missed, for example, the Chargers.
Okay.
Who were at 44.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I opened the window a little bit to 43. Anything under 43 is a real concern for me. Like Jets Steelers wouldn't have had many of them playing unless they're studs. Now, if they're studs, it's very different. Yeah. But if they're not, like for me, Deontay Johnson was Deontay Johnson was a sit for me this week, unless absolutely desperate. And I was desperate to start him in places because I had no one else. But if I had plenty of options, he sat on my bench. Because of the fact it was it was one of the factors, it wasn't all of it, but it was one of the facts. What would have been the betting lines. And so, look at the Vegas betting lines, look at anything under 43. And unless you've got a stud in that game, like a Jonathan Taylor, or, you've got a top 20 player or top 24 player in that position. So like the Packers game, you probably would have started Aaron Rodgers. You probably would have started, and Romeo Doubs was a good bet, given the fact that you didn't have anyone else potentially getting the ball. Those situations are fine as long as you've worked through them, and it's like working through your progressions. It's a different set of data points. But I would have been fading Commanders and Cowboys. I faded Noah Brown on that basis because I just didn't think the volume was going to be there. It didn't work out to be a bad play unless you were desperate. But at the same point, he wasn't that same high ceiling that he had been in previous weeks because Gallup was back. Yeah. All those factors led to me sitting Noah Brown pretty much everywhere I had him because where I could afford to. But yeah, that Bears Giant game, I picked up Richie Grant. I picked up in so many places, didn't play him anywhere unless I had to because it just was not a good game. Depends who's throwing the ball. If Daniel Jones in, I'll look at the betting line, especially against the Packers. I quite fancy it. I think that would be a much better game suited to the script. But I just wanted to make that point that especially this week, but also just a lot of weeks, when you're making start-sit decisions, look at the betting lines and just think, if you're stuck between two players, look at the over-under of both those games. And if one is significantly higher than the other, lean that way.
Yep. Fair. Sound advice. The only other thing I would caveat with is injury opportunity. As soon as somebody like Michael Thomas was out, even if the game score is still low, someone like Chris Olave has to be elevated. So if you're on that choice, just consider that as well. You talked about studs, play studs almost regardless. I would just also take into consideration the injury opportunity that presents itself as
100%. Well. Yeah. And I mean, opportunity trumps everything for me, right?
Yep.
So regardless of how good or how bad your team is, if the so for example, Melvin Gordon now for me, regardless of who they play, is a must start most weeks now.
Yep.
Until I see otherwise, because the opportunity now is just massive. So it's completely different. Like in those scenarios, the Denver Broncos could be in the lowest scoring game next week. I'm still starting Melvin Gordon unless I don't see a reason.
He will probably pick up a score on 40, 50 yards anyway.
So. Because of the fact that there's not that many people now that carry the ball. It's him and Mike Boone.
Yeah.
Mike Boone is not going to get the same workload as Melvin Gordon. It's just not going to happen. So, or at least until it does happen. So, you know, there, as you say, injury opportunity is a massive, massive thing. And if the opportunity trumps everything. So, like, for example, Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are going to be must starts every week, not just because they're studs, but because they're studs because of the opportunity. They're always going to get it regardless.
Fair. Sound advice. Love the advice. And I don't think it's something people do factor in enough. And it's something I've factored into DFS a lot more over the last sort of year, 18 months. So,
and you had a big win. You had a big win this week.
I had a fair win this week, yes. 4 of your Lions Seahawks were in my team. So that helped.
Well, there you go. And I think, as you say, that's something you've got to consider is you've got to look at this. And you almost this is where the DFS part of redraft comes in. Because when you get the situations we've got now and you've got all these injuries and you're stuck with these start-sit decisions, this is where they really do make a big difference. So, I'm completely on board.
So I started going in before you jumped into sound advice, which is great because I missed it on the sheet. There's too many paragraphs here. My eyes are too tired. Statistical trends. And one we started with last week was Breece Hall and Michael Carter and how Breece Hall was slowly starting to see the opportunities increase over Michael Carter at New York. And you now soundly believe he has taken over.
Yeah, massively taken over now. Let's just look at the raw stats. 17 rushes, 66 yards, a touchdown. He also caught 2 passes, but it was off 6 targets for 12 yards. So he was already being used.
4 of them for 25.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, you know, you're looking at he already had the passing down work. We talked about that last week.
Yep.
And he's going to continue to take that role. But now, and the other factor is he's had 26 targets this season. It's the second most of any running back. So he's getting thrown a lot of balls for a running back.
I saw a few snaps with him as well where they were both on the field and they were using Michael Carter as a fullback for Breece Hall. And I think it wasn't who has the handoff. It was that way around.
Yeah. And I think you're going to see more and more of this now. Over the coming weeks, where you're going to see Michael Carter still have a role, but he's not as fantasy relevant now. Everything is going Breece Hall's way. We knew this was going to happen. We just weren't sure when it was going to happen. But the key thing is that this was the first week that in the early down stats, and that is where Michael Carter has been leading, although that's been diminishing every single week. Breece Hall had the clear advantage. So he also got 100% of the goal line work this week. So really now, Breece Hall is leading in every single facet of the game of a running back. He's getting all the
start.
Yeah. And that's what's really key is he's already had all the third down work. He had all the passing down work. He had the goal line work. Now he's getting the early down work. He now becomes a complete back. Not quite a bell cow, but you're now looking at the numbers that you would expect from a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, which is what people were hoping was going to happen to him. I've just had some breaking news that Jahan Dotson is going to miss 1 to 2 weeks for a hamstring injury.
Okay.
Didn't see that one coming anywhere, but Jahan Dotson is out for 1 to 2 weeks. Since you're breaking news. But so Breece Hall is dominating. He's now dominating. He's taken over. He is now. He either will be or you're going to see what basically was happening in Tampa last year, where they might name Michael Carter as the starter, but that's because he takes the opening snap, and actually then Breece Hall takes over. It doesn't really matter who the starter is in fantasy football at the running back position, because if you've got a team that's got two, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the usage, and all the usage says that Breece Hall is the guy now in New Jersey, and he is going to kick on even more. So if now you are thinking of starting Michael Carter, don't drop him, because you never know what might happen, but don't start him, because it's all Breece Hall.
So on that note, another rookie that got drafted in who I expected to start taking over the workload is Kenneth Walker up in Seattle. And that's not quite, we touched on Rashard Penny and his delivery. A bit like Geno, he's literally playing for his job right now, and he's delivering as well. So we're not quite seeing Ken Walker get his opportunity in the same way as Breece Hall is.
No, and while they're competing, I don't think you're going to, Dan. 151 yards, 17 carries, 2 touchdowns. He also caught a 6-yard pass. But again, similar to Hall, he's now got the clear lead on early down work, goal line situations, and he's getting a lot more snaps. What's really key with Penny, and this is something we've never seen from him, is he's getting the third and long work.
Okay.
So traditionally, that was a Chris Carson role. Yeah, it was a Chris Carson role, or it was somebody else who would be taking sort of that 3rd and 3 or longer.
DJ Dallas used to do a bit of it.
Yeah, DJ Dallas.
Travis Holmes on IR, so he can't take it.
But you know, he got 4 snaps in this game of 3rd and 3 and longer, which is more than he's had in any game in the last 3 years. Okay. So he is really dominating every single phase of the game, similar to Breece Hall.
And he's still healthy through 4 weeks, which is a miracle in itself.
Right, and that's the one caveat with Rashard Penny is he can get injured, and probably more likely will, because that's what we see. But right now, Ken Walker can't stop. You can't start him anywhere. Right. He literally has absolutely no significant role in this offense. Yeah. So you have to get to the point now where, if you're Rashard Penny, you start him with confidence. If you're Ken Walker or anyone else, they sit. Don't drop. You never know what might happen. But for me, the difference between Carter and Walker is that Walker should be ascending at some point, and it's not happening. In fact, his role is diminishing.
I had him picked for this game. He was in that DFS lineup we spoke about. I had him in that spot because I thought this will be the highest scoring game that he will get opportunities if they get a front and lead. So I gambled on him as a budget play. I was hoping this would be the week for Kenny Walker, and it won't to be.
No. And I think that's the tricky part now is if you don't have, if you're holding shares of Ken Walker in redraft, he is a droppable commodity in the sense of if you've got someone on the waiver wire you need to pick up.
Yeah,
I try and hold him a couple more weeks because they are scoring points. If you've got a big enough bench, I'd hold him. If it's a shallow bench, you can drop him, but it's not looking good in the short term or medium term for Ken Walker right now. Everything trends towards Rashard Penny. By the way, there was a question earlier, and I wanted to get back to it. Is Melvin Gordon's stocks rises? Boone worth an ad?
I would if you've got space, but I wouldn't be starting Boone at this stage.
No, if you've got space, I think there's other players I would much rather be targeting off the waiver wire. But if he is literally the best out there in your waiver wire, and that could happen in your league, I would. But I think it's Melvin Gordon. I wouldn't say Melvin Gordon this season. Yeah. Let's not forget, this offense is awful, right? It's been awful. Let's not talk about Melvin Gordon as all of a sudden he becomes a fantasy football league winner. But Melvin Gordon becomes now a must-play asset. But I'm not talking him in a top 10 role. He's going to be still an RB2 because that offense is so bad that he's not all of a sudden become.
Melvin Gordon now strikes me as Devin Singletary. What should be a pass-first offense with a backfield to himself and somebody just doing a little bit while he has a breather.
Basically, yeah. I don't think
and that's both sound flex plays given any week.
Yeah, I don't think you're fine. He's basically a level down from Miles Sanders and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah,
that's in his right level with Singletary and Cam Akers.
Love the segue because your next person on your statistical analysis is Josh Jacobs. Look at that.
Yeah, seamless. I know. You think I've done this before, right? So Josh Jacobs came into the season and we weren't even sure that Josh Jacobs, he played week one preseason, and everyone went ballistic. Oh, well, he's not going to have a role, and blah, blah. I still took. The good thing is, it caused enough of a discount that I ended up picking up shares of Josh Jacobs I didn't even think I was going to own because he fell to such a value. I was getting him in the 5th round. I was like, I'll take a chance there because he's better than anything else you're going to get in that round at running back. And now he's starting to deliver some decent results. And I'm going to talk about why this happened this week. 28 rushes, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 passes for 31 yards, right? Yep. You look at that and you think that's a bell cow roll. This is monstrous, but it's only just happened. It hasn't. This usage and the volume's not been there, but the usage and the way he's been used has been the same all season. He is dominating this position. It's now people have gone and realized, maybe Josh Jacobs doesn't have competition. He's not had competition all season. He's absolutely dominated the early down snaps. 86% of the early down snaps have gone to Josh Jacobs this season. 86%. That's a huge number of usage. He's got the clear majority of snaps in short yard situations and the goal line in the 2-minute drill. He's pretty much dominating.
5 targets last week, so he's picked up the catching work as well.
Yeah. The only phase of the game he doesn't dominate is 3rd down. He never has. That's never been his role. He's never had a 3rd down role. That's always
he played 89% of the snaps this week, so he must have had a fair sprinkling of them in there.
Yeah, not many. That's where he does come off the field. He doesn't have a huge amount of work. Sometimes he's on there, but he's not playing. He gets the odd snap, but he's definitely not being used on 3rd down. That is definitely the role of the other backs like Abdullah and everyone else on the roster. That's not going to change. He's not going to get the 3rd down work. He's never had the 3rd down work. He's never going to get the 3rd down work. That's just not his game. He gets targets, but he's not going to get these sort of 10, 20 targets. He's not that guy that's super explosive. He's going to break off a big screen for 50 yards. But the reason why these numbers have highlighted so much more this week is the game script. So the Raiders have lost their opening 3 games. So they've been chasing. They've not run the ball as much.
Correct.
But they obviously were winning this week, and they ran the ball. They used Josh Jacobs to control the time of possession, to extend drives, and they had that luxury of just using him. So Josh Jacobs, people are going to sit up and go, Josh Jacobs had an amazing game. He did, because the opportunity was there. He rushed the ball 28 times. He's not going to rush the ball 28 times every single week. No, However, he's also not going to rush at the low volumes he has been the first 3 weeks.
But
he is a little... 20. Yeah, and I'm not going to say he's game script dependent, because he's not, but all running backs are to a certain degree. The point is that Josh Jacobs' usage maintains that he will be an RB2 every week with RB1 upside because he has got such little competition. He is someone that you can start every week with confidence. Yes, he's going to have some low scoring weeks. If the Raiders are getting blown out, he is not going to get the ball as much. That is going to happen. But he's got enough opportunity and talent to get these RB1 weeks. And that is ultimately, if you paid the 5th round price, 6th round price that you were getting on him, he's going to deliver you very, very good returns on where you were drafting him.
Fair. I agree. I have a fair bit of Josh Jacobs. So you feel in that Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders. So if you took a wide receiver type early or a premium QB in those first early rounds, this week especially, Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders have done you perfectly well.
Well, I talked about Miles Sanders in the book. I talked about Miles Sanders on here. I talked about him on Fantasy Pros. Miles Sanders for me was just a player who was due so much positive regression. A significant amount of positive regression because of the fact that the amount of volume he had to not score a touchdown, that's not sustainable. That's already been proved this season. He's already got multiple scores. He was always going to be in line to be better than he was last season, purely just on just the numbers averaging out to the mean without any more opportunity. Fair. So those 2 players were significantly undervalued. The third one was CPAT. We'll talk about him later. Those 3 players were significantly undervalued in fantasy drafts. And if you went running back, if you went wide receiver heavy right now and took 2 of those 3 guys, you are absolutely laughing. Yeah. But these guys have proven to be really, really good draft picks. But to be honest, it was coming. Yeah.
So one that, if you didn't go wide receiver early, you may well have in the bag is Christian McCaffrey. We were left a little disappointed, I guess, by his usage, especially in the passing game over the first early weeks. Him and Baker not quite hitting it off, but we kind of saw a bit of a change in that this week.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff must have listened to us last week because they completely flipped the script. So he had 9 targets last week, which almost equaled what he had done for the season at that point. 9 catches, 81 yards. He only had 27 yards on the ground. I guess a lot of that was probably down to the injury. They probably didn't want to run him that much.
Yep.
Game script played a certain part of this as well. But ultimately, you'd be used to Christian McCaffrey running with the football.
100, as he did. Yeah, many times.
So it's hard to tell, is this now what we're going to expect, where he's going to get involved in the passing game more? Or was this because of the injury, they thought we're going to give him 15 touches, 17 touches, whatever it is. But we'd much rather him get it in the open field where the tackles are less likely to be heavy, he can step out of bounds, and he doesn't get hit as much. I don't know. We will find this out next week. The thing was, he was far more potent in the passing game than he has been on the ground this season. The one thing I would say, and the part that I'm still ultimately really concerned about with Christian McCaffrey, and this is what, again, I still talk about him not being in that upper echelon of top 5 running backs because it's still the usage isn't there. Even though it was better this week, especially in the passing game.
Yeah, the combined usage, yeah.
And if you're playing PPR, you're really happy with what you got, and you'd much rather have this Christian McCaffrey than the Christian McCaffrey from the week before. But he's had 5 rush attempts in the red zone all season. Like, that's not good. It's not going to get you what you need to get out of an elite running back. He only has 4 yards on those 5, and he has got 1 touchdown. But he's only got 1 target and 1 catch in the red zone. So he's had the ball 6 times in the red zone all season in 4 games. It's not enough. That's not enough to get him anywhere near to where he needs to get to be in that upper echelon. So that is something that I really hope the Panthers coaching staff are listening to, and hopefully we can see Christian McCaffrey get more usage in the red zone in the coming weeks. Because
that PPR is still at RB5 on the year. So, if you drafted him at 2, you're okay at the minute. And
you are.
But it continues to trend the way it's going.
Yeah, I still think there's some flags that I'm concerned about. And unfortunately, you're not going to get the same value you might have got because he, didn't practice last week. There is injury concern, etc.
And they've got some tough run Ds coming up: San Francisco, the Rams, Tampa. So
we've got to play
look
Tampa
for
twice.
a massive change in it anytime soon. But it's trending better. He's still playing 80+% of the snaps, so he's on the field. So you just got to hope that the talent wins through and he gets his opportunities a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Moving on. We got a receiver next end. So New York Jets, Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. So I've talked about Garrett Wilson being someone who, for me, is like well up there. For me, he's a bona fide top 30 wide receiver for the rest of the season. You look at the box score on this and you sit there and think, it started Garrett Wilson. It's an absolute disaster. He's not going to do anything with Zach Wilson. I'm here to kind of alleviate some concerns because if you looked at the stat lines, it wasn't very good. But here's what was good. And this is why looking behind the box score, looking at all the other things that make up usage and production. Because if you look at just the flat box score, 2 catches, it's not great.
On a low-scoring Vegas line game.
Right. But 77% of snaps is the highest he's played all season. He was second in targets on the team with 6. Corey Davis had 7, right? And now people are thinking, it's Corey Davis season. No, listen. Game script dependent. They were winning the game. So where's the ball going to go? It's going to go in the slot. It's going to go to, high percentage plays. That's where Corey Davis monopolizes the usage. Him and Braxton Berrios, they get that line of work. When the Jets are winning games, Corey Davis is going to have more targets to maintain time possession, keep the ball moving, etc. When the Jets are losing, which they will do a lot this season,
a bit more,
and Garrett Wilson's going to get all of that. And Garrett Wilson, for me, where I compare Garrett Wilson and his pecking order is how is he doing against Elijah Moore? Because if he is getting more targets, more snaps, he didn't have more snaps than Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore did have more snaps, but he got more targets. And don't forget, they switched quarterbacks this week. So it's really interesting to see, were they going to revert back to Elijah Moore Or was it going to be Garrett Wilson? The truth is that Garrett Wilson still got more targets. He's still got more participation. That's what's really important. Everything is still trending towards Garrett Wilson being the guy on this offense you want to own.
And he has a lot of red zone targets as well.
Right.
Which
so he's had he's had 9 red zone targets this year, which is only behind Zach Ertz and Devontae Adams.
I was hoping you were going to ask me who he was behind then.
Yeah.
Come across really knowledgeable because you wrote it down for me.
But he's had as many red zone targets as Travis Kelce.
Okay.
Which is good.
A lot, yeah. Which is a lot.
You'd take that if you get it by the end of the season. So yeah, lots of things to love about Garrett Wilson. Don't worry about this week. One of those things.
Super. So the next trending you've got is someone not necessarily too worried about, but someone to probably toss away and pick up Mike Boone for. We're going to Tampa, Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White. What are we seeing here?
Well, a lot of the people will look at the box score and think, "Oh wow, it's Rachaad White's season.
He's worked his way in. Yeah,
he's worked his way in." Don't. This is the ultimate red herring, right? It's the ultimate red herring, and this is why we do this segment of the show is to just distill myths. And it's not Rachaad White's season. He's not coming to take over. There's a really good explanation to explain what happened last week. So let's look at, first of all, they both carried the ball 3 times, right? So you look at it and go 50-50 workload. And then you look at Leonard Fournette's snaps. He played 61% of snaps, his lowest of the season. Doesn't look great. Rachaad White is trending up. He gets 5 targets. He catches 5 balls. He scores a touchdown. It's all looking great. But Fournette still had the most amount of catches. But the clear thing was the Bucs got down really early in this game. They were down 14-3. They had to chase the whole game. Yep. They literally just went, see ya. Goodbye the run. Just abandoned it. Completely abandoned it. The Buccaneers rushed the ball 6 times.
Much to our pain and discomfort watching it. Because it was the one thing you could tell we needed to do.
Right. So they ran the ball 6 times yesterday, which is the second lowest in NFL history, behind the 2020 Buccaneers, who did it when they got blown out to the Saints like 38-3.
or 38-3. Yeah. They rushed 5 times, if I remember rightly.
That's right. Yep. So one off their own record. They just abandoned the run. And so they just put as many receivers out there. And listen, the Chiefs, that suited the Chiefs perfectly. It just meant, you can have runs over the middle. It's very similar to what the Buccaneers did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Yes, Travis Kelce, you can have yours over the middle. We're going to fail to give up the big play. Now, the difference was Mike Evans and the big play happened a lot. And that's why the Buccaneers kept within some sort of distance, but just not enough to actually get on to win the game. Yeah. But the point was they just abandoned it. It just said goodbye to the run. And so when you look at that and you think, right, you're not going to use Leonard Fournette in the running game. Of course, he's not going to play that many snaps because you're just going to line up wide receivers. The fact that Leonard Fournette still played as many snaps as he did, whilst only running the ball 3 times, tells you just how important he is to this offense.
I also think as well, we've got a long season ahead. Tampa are projected to make the playoffs. He played, 87 and 91% of the snaps in the games prior. He can't do that if Tampa are going to go deep in the season and into the playoffs. So you are so far behind. You're not targeting him as much. Just give him a little rest.
I genuinely don't think that's what happened. And I genuinely think they'd be quite happy for him because Leonard Fournette gets little niggling injuries, but the last couple of years he's been relatively healthy, and he's bulked up this season to try and resist these injuries. Yeah, exactly. I just genuinely think this is one of those weird scenarios where Rachaad White has been used heavily in a situation where it was literally let's throw everyone out of the receiver position.
Yeah,
and I don't think you're going to see that because you had Gage on account, you had Jones on account. I don't think Godwin was necessarily on account, but he definitely didn't get as much as he probably would have.
He also picked up a little knock on his hip, so that sort of set him a few drives. So
you get all of those things. You bring bodies in, but ultimately, when the Buccaneers run a more balanced offense, Rachaad White is not going to be anywhere to be seen. He'll get a few touches, but he's not fantasy relevant. So those that were sitting there like, can't wait for the Rachaad White breakout, it's just not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen anytime soon.
I think from a dynasty perspective, he has shown when called upon, he can have a result and he can do a job. So I love that from a dynasty perspective.
Correct.
From a redraft this year, I have to agree with you. Rachaad White will not be a league winner anytime soon.
Well, unless Fournette goes down, then what we have known now is he's vaulted Keyshawn Vaughn. He is going to be the number 2 back, but that's it. And there's no role as it currently stands for fantasy football for Rachaad White in redraft. But yes, you're right. In Dynasty, you'd be very pleased because it looks more and more likely that he will have a role definitely next year, but probably more importantly, the year after, 2 years down the line, when they probably move on from Leonard Fournette with this contract and everything else that goes with it. So yeah, just one of those things. Don't worry about Rachaad White in redraft.
Super. Another running back then, J.K. Dobbins, working his way back from injury. He's going the right way here? Must be.
Yeah, surprised to see him play 50% of snaps. Didn't think he'd play that much, but then it was a close game. They really needed him out there. You know, he's always going to split time with somebody, more likely Gus Edwards when he's back. At this moment, it's Justice Hill. Justice Hill played 36% of snaps. Mike Davis, for those of you that care, played 2% of the snaps. So, you know, he's not a thing. Kenyon Drake was completely omitted from this game. So, you know, it all looks good for J.K. Dobbins. This is the kind of usage we will see. Might see a little bit more snaps played.
I think we'll in games where they get out ahead in games early as well. I think we'll see more usage on him.
Well, it depends how much, because if they go way out, they'll use Justice Hill or Gus Edwards or whoever it is. But in the games that what you want to see is the games that Baltimore are winning by 7.
Mm-hmm.
That's the JK winning or losing by 7. That kind of close game scenario really suits J.K. Dobbins. That is where he's going to get maximum amount of usage. So we saw it yesterday. Great to see 2 touchdowns, 62% of the total rushing attempts, double the amount of targets of Justice Hill. Everything looks good as long as he's healthy. Right now, he projects to be somewhere around about RB16 to RB18. Feel good about him being in that range. It's still higher than where you probably drafted him. So it's a good spot. You're not going to get too many RB1 weeks like this week out of Jake. You'll get a few. You'll break a few, and it will definitely have that RB1 upside some weeks, but it's not going to happen every week. But this usage is good. This is the kind of usage I would at least expect as a floor for J.K. Dobbins. And first week back, really encouraging to see he's got that floor. That says to me that he is as close to health as we're probably going to get. And I'm, just overall pretty positive that he had the game that he did. So mid-range RB2 with RB1 upside when he has games like he did yesterday.
Super. And somebody else we touched on a little bit earlier, but a little bit more numbers and analysis behind it, if you will. Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, just terrible, right? And it's not all his fault, and I've kind of mocked him in jest, but really, 16.75 passing attempts per game, 50.7% completion percentage. He's throwing for less than 118 yards a game, where he's averaging half a TD a game and 1 INT a game. And then people go, well, what about the rushing? 8.5 rushes for 37 yards. Not going to do it. It's just not going to do it in fantasy football. It's not going to do it in NFL. They're 2-2. I don't know how they're 2-2. I don't understand it, but whatever they are, great D, miserly offense. He is, for me, droppable. He's even droppable in Superflex. Like, it's that bad. You can sit there and hold on to him.
Well, if you can go and get a Wentz or a Goff that are actually delivering right now off the waivers, a Geno Smith off the waivers, you do that all day long. Because
in the 1 QB league,
even if they're losing games and they're throwing interceptions, these guys are throwing 3-4 touchdowns a week as well to counter it, which Fields isn't giving you.
And he's not rushing 15 times a game.
No.
So this offense is running a very, very low amount of plays. And they're going to run the ball with Montgomery and Herbert. And they're just going to run the ball. And Justin Fields barely features in this offense now. It's embarrassing to see. It's embarrassing to watch.
It's a shame almost.
It is a shame. But this is where we are. If you have Justin Fields in a 1 QB league and you haven't replaced him, it's only because there isn't anyone to replace him with. There's just no point. And if you're in a Superflex league, you can't start him. You can't start him in any format.
No.
Your only hope in a Dynasty league is to sit him and hope it improves. In a redraft, you don't need to worry about it. Just get rid of your roster. Yeah, I would much rather stream quarterback than
Davis Webb or Justin Fields this week.
Davis Webb, because Davis Webb throw the ball.
Yeah, you left it. Yeah.
Like what is so look, if you work out his average game from a fantasy perspective, it spits out at like a little over 10 points a game.
Okay. It's not enough from a QB.
So 10.8 points a game.
Super
Like,
flex.
You'll
have a receiver that can run in there. You can put Melvin Gordon in there now instead.
Well, let's look at it, right? So he's averaging about 10.8 points
Who else
a
are you going to have? You're going to have Josh Palmer, Nico Collins. Someone like that's probably going to put you up 8 to 12 points a game anyway.
So if he was a wide receiver this week at 10.8 points in PPR, I'm just waiting for this to spit out and refresh. At 10.8 points a game, he would have been the wide receiver 33.
Okay.
Players just finishing above him: Nico Collins, Alec Pierce, Isaiah McKenzie, who left the game early.
I bet a lot of teams had them on their bench in a super flex league.
Yeah. Running back, he'd have been the running back 26.
Okay.
So right there is 50 odd players that you could play over Justin Fields in the Superflex spot. Yes, quite a few of them will probably be in your starting spot. But ultimately, if we looked at it from a season perspective and I went on the averages, let me tell you now. So 10.8 would put him, way down. I don't even have the number. It's outside the top 50.
Okay. In
wide receivers. So ultimately, he is performing effectively over the season as a wide receiver 5.
Yeah.
So that's how you got to view him now. So if you have him in the Superflex, he's not startable, as we're saying. Just rid yourself of the headache and play an offensive player. Or if you can pick up, say, Tyrod, or because Tyrod's going to play this week, Davis Webb. I wouldn't play Davis Webb, but if you gave me a sit between Justin Fields or Davis Webb, I'm playing Davis Webb all day long.
Bailey Zapp, he looked okay when he came in.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way: Zach Wilson is over halfway to Justin Fields' passing attempts on the season. Yeah. So yeah, just don't play Justin Fields.
Awesome. People who else are playing injuries, we go through the monitor every time. I said at the start of the show, there feels like there is an ever increasing number.
I've got a new one for you.
Go on.
John Harbaugh's just come out and said that Rashad Bateman is dealing with a mid-foot injury. Now that sounds like plantar fasciitis, if I'm honest. If that's a mid-foot injury,
yep.
I can't really think of any. Like if you're injuring the bridge of your foot, that is more likely what it is. I'm not a doctor, but I've had plantar fasciitis.
You can sprain the arch of your foot, can't you? I've done that before playing football.
Yeah, so
that's really hard to run on.
Yeah,
really so hard. It takes a long time to recover to full health.
So that's a new one to keep an eye on. But yes, there are quite a lot of injuries this week.
Really quickly, then let's shoot from Javonte Williams is going to IR, ACL, MCL, PCL, you name it. Shame. Cordell Patterson's his knee, as it always is. He's off to IR, so it'll be a minimum of 4 games for him.
Yeah.
Tua is now officially in concussion protocol. They announced just before we come on air that he will miss this week's game against the Jets.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor was believed to be a high ankle sprain. I did see earlier that the scans have come back negative, and they are still hopeful that whatever it is will clear itself up in the week, and he may go. So keep an eye on that one.
It is Thursday night football.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one thing I would say. It is Thursday night football. If you're here in the UK watching us, I would say, yes, there is a chance he can go. If he's not practiced by Wednesday, don't risk it.
Correct. Daniel Jones, I think we're still waiting scan results on that one. But again, they have to travel to London. Tyrod Taylor, we don't believe with concussion protocol will travel at all. AJ Green, I'll say if you have to start AJ Green, you're probably in a problem. But looking at the rest of these injuries, you may have to start AJ Green somewhere. So, do you have an update on AJ Green? I'm not aware of that one myself.
I don't think he's back next week.
Okay.
Could be after that.
David Montgomery, I think, is expected back. They had an outside chance of him this week, so hopefully he'll recover for this one. James Crowder broke his ankle, I heard.
Yep, broken ankle.
Right?
Yeah, broken ankle. So additional tests to see what other damage went along with it, but it is likely he will miss a significant amount of time. He's out officially indefinitely. I would expect him to go to IR with that injury.
Me too, yeah.
I would probably not play him for the rest of the year. But mind you, one thing I would say, He hasn't been doing it in the fantasy leagues, so it's a horrible thing. You don't wish an injury on anyone, but it's one of those things of at least now you can kind of just move on cleanly without the guilt of what if.
Well, I see you've got Isaiah McKenzie on here as well. I didn't know that one.
He left the game. He left the game on Sunday with an injury. It didn't return. I think it was concussion.
I know Gabriel Davis was pretty banged up as well and didn't play a lot at all in the game. So yeah,
it's really
they'll be after Cole Beasley back soon in Buffalo.
Yeah, well, they can sign him off the Bucks practice squad, so that is something that could happen. But yes, ultimately, Isaiah McKenzie is one to watch this week. Michael Thomas didn't go in London with a toe injury.
Yep.
So interesting to see what happens this week to see if he can come back.
As well as Jimmy Swinston, obviously, with his back injury. He's not on the list here, but
no,
he's out. So
yeah, they've got a few injuries, and Alvin Kamara's not on here either. No. He's another one to watch. So the Saints just... I
think he was going to be close, so you'd expect with a longer week. They're going to have a bye, I guess, do they? Coming out of London? No, they passed on it, did they?
Yeah, I don't think there are week 5 buys. It's next week's bye, isn't it?
Did they both pass on the bye then?
I don't think
no bye for the Saints till week 14.
Yeah, that's it. Because there's no buys in week 5. They're week 6.
Yeah.
So yeah, they got a long way to go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. That's for sure.
Who else on here? Mac Jones.
Mac Jones. Yeah.
Looks
not
like
sure.
While, though. And now Brian Hoyer's gone down as well.
Yeah, it could be that. It'd be interesting to see where he is with his injury. Obviously didn't look good when he came off last week or the week 4, week 3 anyway. So we're looking for an update on him. Basically, I would say this: if he's not practicing by Thursday, chances are he's probably not going to play.
Correct. Laviska Shenault is a bit of a hard player anyway. I think if he's coming in, I wouldn't worry too much on that one.
Once again, he went down, and he unfortunately is someone who always seems to get an injury. So he left the game on Sunday, was quickly ruled out. It's never a good sign they're quickly ruled out. So be interested to see what happens with him.
You got Dak Prescott, who I think many are hoping is back for week 5.
Yeah, no update.
4-0, they may choose to healthy scratch Dak. What do you reckon?
Well, they have the Rams in week 5, so it wouldn't shock me
if they say
if they it depends on at the moment he still can't grip the ball, so I think that's going to be he's a possible return, but he had a surgically repaired thumb. If he can't grip the football, he's not going to play. It's as simple as that. Like it's one of those. It's not like one of these injuries where they're going to wait and see what happens. It's ultimately, can you pick a ball? Can you throw a ball? Can't play. It's really, really simple one to see where he is. So I would say, again, if we haven't seen anything by Thursday, probably unlikely he's going to play.
Yeah. Cam Brate, the Bucks left with concussion. He's now in concussion protocol, so we'll see how that pans out. Traylon Burks looks pretty bad. It looks like he's definitely going to miss time. Yeah, definitely going to miss time.
They're going to try and manage it, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how much time he does miss. But yeah, he has turf toe. So that's not a great thing to have.
I've had it. It's horrid.
Yeah. So there you go. So they have said no surgery is necessary.
Okay.
So if he does miss time, it's not going to be a huge amount, but he will miss some time. So yeah, he's not going to play on Sunday.
Super.
Which does make this question here. Can Woods handle our wide receiver one load? All the Titans rely on Henry and Hooper. Yes, Woods can handle the load. It's whether or not they will give him the load.
Yeah.
But he can handle it for sure. He's a phenomenal talent, Robert Woods. I think for me, one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL.
I would also say the last 2 weeks we've seen Derrick Henry start to look like Derrick Henry.
Absolutely.
I would not be surprised to see that continue now as well.
And isn't it funny that as soon as he starts looking like Derrick Henry, the Titans start winning games?
Correct. Yeah.
They're a very one-dimensional offense. Yeah. Robert Woods with this kind of news probably... Yeah, Robert Woods probably becomes an interesting top 40 play now. I've been hovering him around wide receiver 60. So he probably becomes a top 40 play now that he's not dealing with Burks. But I still don't think he's like a must start in all formats.
Cool. We've got Keenan Allen, who I think has been close to playing the last 2 games. So
yeah,
If it's not and it's worse, they're certainly not letting on that there's a bigger problem there.
Yeah, I need him back. I've got him on so many fantasy teams. That one's killing me right now. So
we've got DeAndre Swift, who's going to be out for I think another couple of weeks at the very least here.
Yeah, I think that's likely that he's going to be back, and I don't think they're going to rush him back because they've got enough with Jamal Williams and Craig Reynolds to.
One that's not on here, and it isn't going to be too fantasy relevant, but Lewis Seen of the Vikings, obviously.
Well, that was nasty.
Leg, in the game in London, and went immediately for surgery here in London. So I hope that pans out. Yeah,
I mean that's a horrible injury. He will be out for quite. I mean, he won't be back this year.
No. Anything else, Murf? I think we've gone through. It feels like a hell of a lot, to be honest with you.
We have. I feel like we're still sort of recovering week 4. I mean, it'd be great. You and I are going to be sitting together on Sunday, so I'm really looking forward to sitting and watching the game with you. And you know, we'll be in London. You'll be in London far earlier than I will be, but I think the plan is to get to London quite early, and it'd be great to see some of you. Do hit us up on the Twitter machine if you are around, and let's try and link up where possible. It'd be great to meet some of you, all of you, or whoever is coming, and spending some time and chatting ball, and happy to answer questions. I'm not going to do too much fantasy stuff during the game, but yeah, I'm looking forward.
I always find these games are difficult because you are right. I will meet early. I will have a drink. You'll forget about your lineups, and you'll get to there, and you're like, "What?"
Yeah, I mean, I
don't like these weeks.
I'll be setting all mine on the train, so I've got a nice journey back to London. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to spending some time here. Looking forward to seeing some of you. But yeah, do get in touch with Dan and I if you're around, and we'll try and meet up with as many of you as we can. So yeah, just reach out. It'd be good to see you.
Awesome. On that note, then, Murf, I'm going for dinner.
Yeah, me too. Thanks very much for tuning in. As always, tune in next week, and we look forward to welcoming you then. But until then, don't forget, as always,